It's great to see you.
It's good to see you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It's lovely to see all of you in person. Believe it or not, I've missed all of you. So my name is Amanda Fisher. I'm the Assistant State Director for NFIB here in Michigan. We have about 10,000 members here in Michigan. We are a national organization, so we have about 300,000 members nationwide and a presence in all 50 states and Washington, D.C., and we've been doing it for over 75 years. I am here to support this bill, and in preparing for this testimony, I got to go back in time because I was very involved NFIB and me personally, very involved in 2011 and 2012 when the trigger was set up and everything. And so I wanted to give everybody a little background because I think you just can't take this in a vacuum to understand where we were. But first, a couple of things to remember with the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. It is entirely employer funded. This isn't a part of the general budget. This isn't something that employees pay, like, FICA or, Medicare. This is entirely funded by employers. If they let more employees go, they have a higher rate. We have an experience rating. So if you don't use it, you don't pay as high a rate. Each employer has their own account, and honestly, and sometimes the higher the rate, the less you want to hire, right? Because it's a lot more expensive. So in 2011, you go back, and it was after the Great Recession, the trust fund was in debt, $3.1 billion at least, to the federal government. The Fed were charging us an interest rate between 4% and 5%. In addition, when we had that debt, and I don't want to, there are a lot of little parts, and I will admit I don't know all the technical, but I know just enough to know that there are other things when we owed the federal government that money. The FUTA, the federal unemployment tax, would start to, there's a tax credit they give us, and that would start to diminish. They would also, there was also a state solvency tax on negative balance employers. So especially at that time when you think about the big three and big manufacturing that were really suffering, they had a lot of negative balance, right? So that would have been very difficult and very punitive for them. What we chose to do, and again, that would have been an escalating tax increase year by year by year while we weren't, it was like a really bad credit card, right? So we would be paying the minimum, but our interest rate would be more. And so then the minimum would increase, but we're not paying anything off. I mean, that's essentially what we were looking at. So the business community worked with the administration to bond to pay off the federal government. And we were one of the first states to do that. And we had a really great rate. It was between 1% and 2%. We were able to pay off the federal government. But let's remember, and you guys may recall in the past year, we finally paid off that assessment. Employers were paying that assessment. It's not, we bonded, but employers were still paying it. It was somewhat socialized, although we did go ahead and experience rate that as well. But they still paid it. So during all of this, when all this was going on, one of the decisions was we're going to raise the taxable wage base from $9,000 to $9,500 because we want to build the trust fund back up. Because we knew if there was another recession, if something happened, we wanted to have the money in there. Because I want you to know, as representing small business owners, my members, if they have to let their employees go through no fault of their own, they want them to be taken care of. There's some bad apples, sure, but for the most part, I even have people who are like, oh, but yeah, they left, but I still want them to have unemployment. It's like, but you can't. That's not the point of that's not the point of the service. So we wanted to make sure we had that trust fund build up. So we did that. Now, at that point, I think this is indicated in your bill, it was going to be quarterly. They were evaluating quarterly whether the trust fund was reaching 2.5 or not. And then that became too much of, we revisited it in 2016 and said, okay, it's pretty stable. It's above 2.5. We're going to revisit it yearly instead of quarterly. So you're not always changing back and forth. That was tough on the agency and tough on employers. So, I mean, we had, the trust fund was between $4 and $5 billion when COVID hit, right? So again, those steps we took 10 years ago made sure that we were able to sustain the losses. Because if, as Representative said that, so at the end of June, we had 1.7. That's still not too shabby. It's hard to sit and watch all of it go away over the past months and for the reasons. But so I just had wanted to make sure that you guys had a little bit of background to understand how that happened. So we very much appreciated that the governor in her executive order has made sure that businesses, individual accounts and their experience ratings wouldn't be harmed if they had to close or lay off due to COVID. That was really important. We all commented on that and said, thank you, that's wonderful. We feel that this bill is consistent with that policy by not penalizing employers with the tax increase that will hit 2021. Now, because let's just face it, businesses right now are struggling. There's a lot of uncertainty. And the concern is that you increase the taxable wage base. And if a business is just hanging on, that could be enough of a tax increase that they then have to lay people off. And then it becomes this negative cycle that goes downward, right? And so you then end up losing more money in the trust fund. So right now, and also something to understand, even though they're the non-chargeable account, that's where all of this money is being taken from, it's still, listen, one way or another, unless there's a major appropriation, employers are going to have to make this up, right? But I would also argue that right now is not the time. If the federal government wanted to, bail out the state trust funds, I think that would be a great use of federal money. We don't officially have a position on that, so that's just a comment. Don't take that as official NFIB. But I think, but right now, I think as we are with a lot of things, to defer that and then have a discussion later once we kind of know what's going on would be a wise decision. Ultimately, we want the trust fund to be whole. It's important for everyone. But I just think that, popping a tax increase on employers when they're already having to pay for PPE they never thought they maybe are still closed. I mean, there are businesses that are still closed. And I'm not, at this point, I don't want to get into the policy of whether that should be done or not. It's the reality we're living in. And so this is what we need to do. We can look at how to make that trust fund up later. Again, though, that's not coming out of the budget, so you don't have to have it all balanced by the end of September. And I know there's a concern, too, that this could lead to benefit cuts to claimants. And I want to say, to my knowledge, nobody in the business community is even thinking that. We know that that's important. I know.
No, forgive me. I
apologize. I've gone on too long.
No, I was supposed to have the room cleared by 11:30, and I wanted to make sure that we were accommodating as many members in that as possible. So I'm literally about to get kicked out by the chief sergeant here in about 3 minutes.
No, so but anyway, so I think that's why, we wanted to go ahead and support this because I think it's a wise policy decision and it's consistent with what the governor has done.
And we will have testimony on this next week. I'm sure there'll be several questions for you as well. And we want to make sure that, again, that members and, again, all stakeholders have the opportunity. I cannot thank you enough, especially providing that background as well.
Thank you.
We do also, again, wishing to speak, and we'll continue this next week, Dave Wortham's Michigan Manufacturing Association in support of the bill.